While Bolton is being criticized from the left for refusing to cooperate with their impeachment investigations into the president, or from the right for breaking ranks with Republicans less than 5 months from Election Day, he describes a president who's erratic, behaved irrationally, saw conspiracies behind a rock, and was stunningly uninformed. Here in an exclusive interview with ABC's Martha Raddatz.
I don't think he's fit for office. I don't think he has the competence to carry out the job. There really isn't any guiding principle that I was able to discern other than what's good for Donald Trump's reelection.
You say that you were astonished by what you saw. A president for whom getting reelected was the only thing that mattered, even if it meant endangering or weakening the nation?
Well, I think he was so focused on the reelection that longer-term considerations fell by the wayside. So if he thought he could get a photo opportunity with Kim Jong-un at the demilitarized zone in Korea, there was considerable emphasis on the photo opportunity and the press reaction to it, and little or no focus on what such meetings did for the bargaining position of the United States.
In allowing the book's publication to proceed, a federal judge did warn that Bolton was in jeopardy of forfeiting his $2 million book advance and could face further litigation for proceeding with the publication of the book before receiving clearance from the White House over possible classified information contained therein, something Bolton's lawyers have rejected. While the top Democrat in Congress also weighed in.
President Trump, by dint of what we saw in the impeachment, by what others are being quoted as saying in terms of leaders in the president's own administration, President Trump is clearly ethically unfit and intellectually unprepared to be the president of the United States. That doesn't seem to matter to the Republicans in the United States Senate. It didn't seem to matter to John Bolton. He chose royalty over patriotism.
President Trump, who this weekend rallied in Tulsa, Oklahoma in front of an underwhelming crowd with rows of empty seats, tweeted that Bolton was a despicable man who was washed up until he was brought back into the White House. A question put to his spokesperson.
Why does the president keep hiring people who are dumb as a rock, overrated, way over their heads, wacko, and incompetent?
So the president makes hiring decisions based on the fact that he likes to have countervailing viewpoints. I spoke to him this morning about the hiring of John Bolton in particular, and he said, I like to counterbalance my own opinion with individuals that oftentimes have the very opposite opinion of my own. He likes the model of having a team of rivals, like what we saw in President Lincoln's administration. I've been a part of that. I often see rigorous debate, and the president uses his gut and makes the best decision as to how to move forward. So that's what goes into his hiring practices, and I think the team of rivals with President Lincoln worked quite well.
The room where it happened already topping Amazon's bestseller list. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
Now, to talk about this Sherwin Bryce-Pease, my colleague joins us from New York. So, Sherwin, President Trump known to be the Teflon Trump because despite years of gaffes or saying and doing things that have raised eyebrows, his support somehow has remained steadfast. But most importantly, I'm wondering about the Bolton book. This is not the first time a high-profile person that Donald Trump has hired and fired comes out and speaks negatively, not only about him, but him as president of the United States. What is the expectation of this book and its impact?
I mean, you make a very good point, Sippy. So in the fact that it's not the first high-profile denunciation, if you will, of this president, but you are seeing it sort of coalesce around this period just ahead of the elections, right? Republicans essentially have bitten their tongues throughout his presidency, despite some of the outrageous things we've come accustomed to from this president. You saw the reaction from top military leaders when he tried to invoke the Insurrection Act to use the military against protesters. You saw quite a firm rebuke of the president from his former defense secretary, his current defense secretary, and retired generals, which is something unprecedented in the United States, where military leaders essentially inject themselves into a political debate. You've also seen staggering poll numbers where you see that, that base of the president that has been consistently about 40 to 45% now slip below 40%. 35% is his support in the latest Reuters Ipsos poll against Joe Biden that is leading with 48% among registered voters in this country, in addition to have very damning allegations being made in the Bolton book. In addition to that, on top of the fact that this is an impeached president. So you are seeing a realignment, certainly, in this country from within the Republican Party against this president, which really doesn't bode well for him less than 5 months out from Election Day.
And Sharon, as you say, in the past, Republicans have somewhat criticized him, but still continue to toe the Republican line. And he himself has, at some point, distanced himself from things he has done, as in firing people and then saying somebody else did it. What kind of claims does Bolton make in his book about the president? And are they something that will stick, so to speak?
Whether they stick or not, I don't know, right? But what is he saying? He talks about Trump seeking help from Chinese President Xi Jinping, urging the Chinese to buy more agricultural products that will benefit him in states where agriculture and farmers are struggling under the tariffs imposed by the U.S. president on China, directly asking an adversarial country, if you will, to help him out in a domestic political affair. He offered, according to Bolton, personal favors to the president of Turkey, President Erdogan, after U.S. investigators launched an investigation into the Turkish company over possible Iranian U.S. sanctions violations. He says that Democrats should have taken more time and not confined their impeachment hearing and investigation to just the Ukraine issue, but spend more time investigating other misdeeds from this president. He also told President Xi that the parts of the American population wanted to do away with the two-term constitutional limit so that he could run for a third term, which is really raising eyebrows here. And Trump also didn't know things like that the United Kingdom was a nuclear power, and that Finland, where he met Russian President Vladimir Putin for the first time, that Finland was not part of Russia. So John Bolton is saying this is a very uninformed president that does not deserve to serve a second term.
So let's turn to the COVID-19 pandemic, statements made by the president, especially around his own staff's handling of the disease.
But you don't hear them talking about COVID. To be specific, COVID-19. That name gets further and further away from China as opposed to calling it the Chinese virus. And despite the fact that I have done a phenomenal job with it, they call me, they say, the job you're doing, here's the bad part. When you do testing to that extent, you're going to find more people, you're going to find more cases. So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please.
That particular statement stirring a hornet's nest, especially given the fact that there were some of his staff that tested positive. So how are people reacting to these comments in particular?
Well, public health experts, epidemiologists are really just stunned at these latest words from the president. Essentially, the argument from the president is that if we didn't do as many tests as we are doing, the case load will be much less. So that essentially is the argument. And of course, we are seeing predictions from various models that say another 90,000 people will die by October. It's just the president also, Tsepiso, talking about how the United States is testing more than any other country, right? But if you look at the proportional breakdown of that, the United States is testing at around 86,000 tests per 1 million people. And there's several countries, including Russia, Spain, Qatar, Singapore and Portugal, that are testing at a greater proportion based on their population to the United States. So, there's a lot of mixed messaging. You have a death toll prediction of over 200,000. You're seeing the case number in the United States reach close to 3 million already. These are not numbers that the president can pat himself on the back for. The numbers speak for themselves. The projections are really damning. And that is also weighing on his poll numbers. The fact that he cannot defend the fact that some 200,000 people are likely to die come election day.
Thanks a lot for that, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC correspondent in New York. Sherwin, let's talk about what else is happening in the United States with regards to this. The World Health Organization, we saw earlier on, making a statement, but what else can you tell us?
Well, some good news, actually. New York City, which has long been the epicenter of this virus, has entered phase 2 of reopening. So essentially, companies are allowed to reopen, although a lot of companies are telling their telecommuting work from home that they should continue to do that. Places like the United Nations have told staff not to come back before July 31st. But retail stores are opening. There's in-person shopping. You can now dine outside of restaurants, but at a 50% capacity. Salons and bars are reopening, so people can go get a haircut. Listen to what Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York State, had to say on this.
We have the lowest number of hospitalizations since we started. Amen. And we have the lowest number of deaths since we started. Once again, same numbers yesterday, but on the 3-day average, we are at a new low. And you want to talk about congratulations and something to celebrate. That is something to celebrate. So we went up the mountain, we came down the mountain. That is the configuration of the mountain that we climbed together, the highest mountain.
And just to quote the mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, who spoke at a press conference earlier at SABC, he said it's the biggest step forward towards us jump-starting the city's economy. So some positive news despite all the negativity we've been talking about today.
Always good to end it on a positive note. Thank you very much, Sharon Bryce-Pease, our correspondent in New York. Here at home, the news coming through, as certainly it does around the world as well. The World Health